Jim Crow laws, the laws that separated the South. Jim Crow laws were established between 1874 and 1975 to separate the white and the black races in the American South.
African Americans during Jim Crow had very little freedoms. They had aspirations to pursue life interests and equality and the American dream, but access was always limited based on Jim Crow. There were separate lives for black and white people. The lack of equal public facilities, separate water fountains. I mean, that's always, this is iconic symbol of segregation, to separate cemeteries and funeral parlors. It went from life to death. Hospitals, everything was segregated. In New Orleans, even prostitution was segregated. It was based on this idea of racial superiority, of white supremacy. And it was maintained by fear and terror for the most part. And laws, but still fear and terror for the most part. When there wasn't contact, African Americans lived full, active lives, social lives, with love and community and pride. It's when those two societies interacted with each other that Jim Crow really kicked in, and that second-class citizenship became more apparent, particularly for young children growing up. When you read a lot of autobiographies by black people growing up in the South, there's always this moment of racial realization, and it's when this interaction's happening at a certain age, and this realization that life isn't as wonderful as they thought it was, that they were treated by other people in a very inferior way, and that this was the life they had to lead.
The majority of states and local communities passed Jim Crow laws that mandated separate but equal status for African Americans. But as you can see in this picture, there wasn't anything equal, especially not in education. As you can see on the left side, the white people, the white children, had better schools, better looking tables, better looking everything in the classroom, and the African American classroom doesn't look as good as compared to theirs. Jim Crow's laws touch every part of life. In South Carolina, black and white textile workers cannot work in the same room, enter through the same door, or gaze out of the same window. Many industries wouldn't even hire blacks. Many unions passed rules to exclude them. By 1914, Texas had 6 entire towns in which blacks could not live. Mobile passed a Jim Crow curfew. Blacks could not leave their homes after 10 p.m. Signs marked whites only or colored hung over doors, ticket windows, and drinking fountains. Georgia had black and white parks. Oklahoma had black and white phone booths. Prisons, hospitals, and orphanages were separated, as were schools and colleges. In North Carolina, black and white students had to use separate set of textbooks. In Florida, the books couldn't even be stored together. Atlanta courts kept 2 Bibles, one for black witnesses and one for whites. Virginia told fraternal social groups that black and white members could not address each other as brother. Though seemingly rigid and complete, Jim Crow laws did not account for all of the discriminations blacks suffered. Unwritten rules barred blacks from white jobs in New York and kept them out of white stores in Los Angeles. Humiliation was about the best treatment blacks who broke such rules could hope for. The 1920s and 30s produced new Jim Crow laws. By 1944, a Swede visiting the South pronounced segregations so complete that whites did not see blacks except when being served by them. But World War II changed America inside and out. The link between white supremacy and Hitler's master race cannot be ignored. Jim Crow shocked United Nations delegates who reported home about practice. In 1948, President Harry Truman took decisive action to promote racial equality. He urged Congress to abolish the poll tax, enforce the voting and hiring practices, and end Jim Crow transportation between states. Then, as Commander-in-Chief, Truman ordered the complete integration of the armed forces. He did not wipe out racism, but trained to obey commands. Officers complied as best as they could. During the early 1950s, a white person never had to stand on a Montgomery bus. In addition, it frequently occurred that blacks boarding the bus were forced to stand in the back if all seats were taken there, even if the seats were available in the white section. But on December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to relinquish her seat to a white man. She was arrested, fingerprinted, and incarcerated. Thanks to the brave obstinance of a few black persons, notably Rosa Parks, things began to change and Jim Crow laws were challenged. Fun fact: the term Jim Crow originally referred to a black character in an old song and was the name of a popular dance in the 1820s. Around 1828, Thomas Daddy Rice developed a routine in which he blacked his face, dressed in old clothes, and sang and danced in imitation of an old, decrepit black man. Rice published the words to the song Jump. Jim Crow in 1830. Jim Crow was also used as another slang word for black people.